This is CBC Here and Now.
An ongoing dispute about lights in the battery.
We don't consider the light situation to be a public nuisance.
This is a citywide issue. We need laws to cover this issue.
I'll have more coming up on Here and Now.
To have a full-fledged plan here of, what industries are on the downward swing.
Life after oil. The province's opposition leader sits down with Peter Cowan to talk about his goals for Newfoundland and Labrador in 2023 and beyond.
He said, I've been awarded the Order of Canada, and I just started to cry, which is probably what I'm going to do now. But it was no surprise. It was no surprise.
A local doctor overcomes incredible odds to receive one of the highest orders in Canada. We hear Dr. Connor McGuire's story coming up in about 40 minutes. Good evening and welcome to Here and Now. We begin tonight with a major transportation artery in this province's road network. It will soon be the site of a slowdown and diversion that could last for 2 years. But when the new $10 million taxpayer-funded interchange is complete, access to and from Galway, a growing development in St. John's, will be much improved and safer. Here and Now's Terry Roberts has that story.
It's a project best viewed from above. Right now, it's a road that goes nowhere. It butts up to the Trans-Canada Highway at the western edge of Galway, former Premier Danny Williams' massive development in St. John's, just over the boundary from Mount Pearl. Traffic eastbound along the Trans-Canada Highway can easily enter Galway via this ramp on the upper right. But exiting Galway and heading west on the TCH is a lot more complicated. Drivers have to navigate a series of 3 roundabouts along Danny Drive, hop onto Pitts Memorial Drive, one of the busiest roads in the province, make their way to another interchange, and then enter the westbound TCH. Galway has become a hot destination in recent years, and traffic flows have intensified.
I've witnessed accidents myself, and it's been traffic congestion, and it's been bumper to bumper.
But this landscape is about to undergo a dramatic change. The provincial government has awarded a $10 million contract to this construction company. It's located on the opposite side of the highway from Galway, a stone's throw from the construction site. Farrells will construct an underpass at this location, as well as a roundabout and highway access ramps, allowing motorists to depart and enter Galway via the highway's westbound lanes. It's a big project that will benefit property owners on both sides of the TCH.
All roads lead to Galway.
And one that Danny Williams has been lobbying successive governments to move forward with.
We've already spent our $4 million in bringing it right to the edge of the highway. So that was done some time ago and done deliberately to say, okay, we brought it to this point. Now it's obviously up to a provincial government to get it done.
The transportation minister agrees it's a good project.
I even spoke to ministers that were in this position before me and said they knew this day would come. We believe from a safety perspective and from lots of traffic in this area that this project will ease that and will help out even development in this area, which we welcome as a province.
Galway is a mix of retail, industrial, and residential. About 300 of the more than 2,000 acres have so far been developed. Danny Williams says he's spent about $100 million of his own money. He says that's attracted $100 million more so far in investments. This is the Anchor, a business giant with more than 180,000 square feet of retail space. The pandemic slowed growth at Galway, but Williams says business is picking up again. Williams says a major transportation company bought land and are now constructing this building. An investment, he says, that would not have happened without the new interchange.
It's an acknowledgement of the economic development that's gone out there.
But it won't happen without some inconvenience. Farrells will have to construct a temporary road around the construction site, meaning slowdowns on the primary point of entry into the province's most populated region.
Between us and the contractor, we'll look at it from an operational perspective to ensure that traffic flows through the area.
It's an interruption that could last for 2 construction seasons. But supporters say it will ensure economic development continues in this area for many years to come. Terry Roberts, CBC News, St. John's.
Well, from a traffic disruption to some blaring bulbs. The City of St. John's says it can't take any action to end a long-running dispute about bright lights in the outer battery. Some residents aren't happy with this latest development and are calling on the city to do more to help them. Here now's Mark Quinn reports.
These are the lights at the center of the conflict. Here's what they look like from across St. John's Harbour at night, and here's what they look like up close. A dispute about them has been going on for months, with close to 3,000 people signing a petition to have them removed. People who live nearby say the lights are more than just a nuisance.
It's causing great harm to my neighbors who can't sleep and are having anxiety issues.
Residents like Christina Smith are calling on the city to have the lights removed. But today the city said it can't do that. The mayor says it's a private dispute between residents.
We don't consider the light situation to be a public nuisance.
Residents say a specific article of the City of St. John's Act gives the city power to turn off those lights. But after getting advice from its legal department, City Council disagrees.
Section 377 of the Act was never intended to deal with the private nuisance between neighbours. Council has not directed staff to take action under Section 377, as it does not believe that is appropriate or applicable in this situation.
Residents say if that's the case, then the city's bylaws need to change.
This is a citywide issue. We need laws to cover this issue.
A proposal to change the city's bylaws is expected at the next City Council meeting, but the mayor suggested it's unlikely to be adopted.
At this time, Council is not convinced that a nuisance bylaw would solve the situation or be in the public interest for the whole city.
The lights in question are on this building behind me. It's owned by Colin Way. He's in court tomorrow on this matter. In the early stages of his case, he's facing 3 charges, including mischief in relation to those lights. Mark Quinn, CBC News, St. John's.
Well, it was a beautiful day out there today. Finally saw some extended periods of sunshine, which was nice. Temperatures very winter-like out there as well. So if you had the chance to enjoy the snow, it's a good thing because we've got about one more day to enjoy it, and then things turn, let's just say, mild for most areas. Right now, sitting under a ridge of high pressure. That is why our weather is so quiet. We've got that cold air up across Labrador. Things moderating this afternoon, though, at least through central Labrador and towards the coast as well. But our next area of low pressure in central North America at the moment, that is headed our way right through the weekend. In fact, we're looking at about 3 days of weather associated with this system. Right now, the warning map is pretty colorful. We've got winter storm warnings in effect for parts of the west coast and northern peninsula. Rainfall warnings along the south coast, as well as a wreck house wind warning. Those winds picking up tomorrow. With all the weather starting tomorrow as well, I'll break down what I can for you coming up.
Thanks, Ashley. Well, now turning to gas prices, they're on the rise again across Newfoundland and Labrador. The maximum cost increased slightly overnight by 1.3 cents a litre. The upward move follows Monday's unplanned drop by just over 7 cents. The cost of self-serve regular gas on the Avalon Peninsula is now just above $1.60 a litre. Furnace oil increased by more than a cent a litre, while stove oil increased by nearly 3 cents a litre on the island and nearly 6 cents in Labrador. Propane rose by 1.5 cents a litre. Meanwhile, diesel prices dipped slightly by just more than a cent. And with the rising cost of home heating fuel, Leela Evans says it's a big concern for people living in northern Labrador. The NDP MHA for Torngat Mountains says the quality of life for residents there is being affected by this increase.
On the north coast, if you're relying on a furnace to heat your house, you burn between 2 to 4 drums in the winter, depending on the temperature outside. 2 to 4 drums, and a drum of stove oil is $495. So to heat your house, you're paying a minimum of $1,000 up to $2,000 to heat your house. I don't think we're being properly charged the rate. Normally we're about 29 to 30 cents more than what we're paying in St. John's, the Avalon Peninsula, but right now those prices are much higher. So I think there's something unfair that's going on, and I've gone back to the PUB to try to get it addressed. So we don't mind paying the price, the cost of living in the Northern Labrador. We just don't want to be gouged.
Well, the RNC is warning of an increase in suspected drug overdoses in St. John's. Police say over the last few days, they've received a rise in calls for overdoses. Many of those have involved the use of naloxone, which they say indicates an increased presence of dangerous opioids like fentanyl. The RNC is trying to find the source of these drugs, and they're warning the public of the dangers of using non-prescription medications. Police say if someone you know is using illicit drugs, ensure there is a naloxone kit close by. Well, Eastern Health is going to court over medical services related to the pandemic. It's suing for more than $1 million for care provided to crew members of 2 Portuguese fishing vessels. Now, those ships anchored in Newfoundland waters because of COVID outbreaks a year and a half ago, but their owner is now being accused of not paying the bills. Here now's Rob Antle has the details.
This was the scene in the waters of Conception Bay in the summer of 2021. Help on the way for the Princesa Santa Joana, a Portuguese fishing vessel with more than 30 COVID cases on board. Another Portuguese ship, the Santa Cristina, was anchored near Bay Bulls that same month. 4 crew members there diagnosed with COVID. Eastern Health says it was asked to provide them with medical care. Now, a year and a half later, all this has moved from the hospital room to the courtroom. The health authority has filed a statement of claim for unpaid medical bills after treating crew members on those 2 ships. One person aboard the Santa Cristina spent a total of 128 days in hospital, with medical costs topping $615,000. And the tab for 5 crew members from the Princesa Santa Joana was more than $414,000. Eastern Health is asking the court to order payment of more than $1 million in total, and if it wins the judgment and doesn't get paid, it wants another order to sell the ships. Rob Antle, CBC News, St. John's.
Well, now taking a look at the arts. It's Shakespeare with a twist. An actor from Ontario is performing a version of Hamlet here in this province, and some of the proceeds will go to a fund set up in memory of a local film pioneer. Here now's Troy Turner has more.
Who's there? Long live the king. Marcellus? He.
It's a project that Raoul Beneja started more than 20 years ago. Hamlet, Shakespeare's longest play, condensed down to about half the length. The catch? He's performing it all by himself.
Distilled down to the language, the audience, and the actor, and that's it. Like, what you see up here is what you get. There's no props, there's no costume changes, there's no recorded sound. It's, I suppose, for those 90s people, it's like MTV's Unplugged. It's Shakespeare Unplugged.
It's not Beneja's first show in the province. In 1997, he starred in his first film, Extraordinary Visitor, which is where he met a Newfoundland and Labrador film icon.
First AD and one of the producers was a guy by the name of Paul Pope. And that began this incredible journey I've had in my career where since 1997, over the years, sometimes there's been long breaks, but I've been able to come back to Newfoundland, and sometimes I'm acted on stage, sometimes I'm playing music, and sometimes I'm doing a TV or movie. It's great.
He maintained a friendship with Pope while watching the province's film and television industry grow.
I think you could say that Newfoundland has always punched above its weight when it comes to television and film, and when it comes to arts and culture. I mean, particularly when you look at that incredible roster of people who were in Codco and the people who came after. And so the people behind the scenes, like Paul, they had the same kind of extra impact per capita, I think.
While this show was made possible through the support of Memorial's Grenfell campus, Beneja is raising money during his St. John's performances for the Paul Pope Legacy Fund.
Well, I wanted to find some way to acknowledge Paul, and I sort of thought he was a big supporter of the live arts in St. John's as well. So, I don't have a lot of other ways I can do it. I can play a gig, I can act on stage. Sure, I could write a check from Toronto and, send it with my best wishes, but it felt more important to have the opportunity to use art to acknowledge him and to raise some money.
There are still tickets left for tonight's and tomorrow night's show here at the Rotary Arts Centre in Corner Brook. Before the show, all 17 characters and one actor move to St. John's for performances early next week. Troy Turner, CBC News, Corner Brook.
Details about an event billed as the largest winter festival in Atlantic Canada were unveiled in Mount Pearl today. City officials held their Frosty Festival launch over the noon hour. The festival celebrates winter with events like a city-sanctioned block party, a community breakfast, and a large nighttime concert featuring headliners Shanneyganock. It runs for 7 days, starting on February 8th.
Since 1983, this festival has been celebrating community while embracing our wintry weather. And amazingly, it has become the largest festival of its kind in Atlantic Canada, with approximately 60 events taking place over 7 days in February.
Right now, word on the street is that 30% of the snow crab that was landed in Atlantic Canada last year is sitting in inventory.
Trade sanctions are not stopping Russian crab from flooding the markets in Japan, and that's having an impact on the industry in this province. Coming up, I speak with MP Clifford Small.
Well, we're looking at some significant snowfall as well as rainfall, but the other thing is freezing rain. Significant freezing rain expected as we head through the weekend. I'll break it all down for you coming up.
Well, Ashley, based on that warning and watch board that you put up a few minutes ago, there's a lot going on in the weather right now.
It is a very complicated situation, or should I say complicated forecast as we head through the weekend, because we've got about 3 solid days of weather. Wow. And it looks like it's going to change depending on where you are and the time of day as well. So let's just jump right into the forecast and get right to it. So we're looking at a ridge of high pressure at the moment. Lots of cold air associated with this, which is why we've been seeing those cooler temperatures. And then we see daytime highs today in and around, -6, -7, a little warmer towards the coast of Labrador, some of that warmer air filtering in, but then we still have those temperatures around -19 today in Lab City. But temperatures tonight are going to stay quite cold again. So back down to about -24, not as cold as last night, but about -24 in Lab City. And as far as the rest of Labrador goes, you're looking at -teens or -20s. And then for the island, temperatures dipping in the low-lying areas and through central, you may see those temperatures dip into the -20s as well. Otherwise, we're looking at those -double digits. Good thing is, though, we're under light winds, so it's a nice night to go out for a walk and enjoy the winter weather while it lasts, because things are going to change. Been talking about that all week, and it definitely is going to. So let's take a look at the future tracker just to time things out. This is taking us already through to tomorrow morning. We should see some sunshine to start, at least for the eastern half of the island. Those clouds will quickly move in, and we will see things change, especially for southern areas of the island. We're looking at that snow moving in, which will likely be heavy at times right through the day. Northern Peninsula, central, and eventually eastern Newfoundland will see that snow move in, likely not until after supper for eastern areas, but eventually that will change over to rain, which will be heavy at times along the south coast. So from essentially Port aux Basques through to Burgeo, you are under a snowfall warning, which means, well, Burgeo is definitely under a snowfall warning, but you're looking at between potentially 15 to as much as 20 centimeters of snow falling before that changes over to rain. Now, the ground is already frozen because of the cold temperatures, and then when we start to see that change over to rain, temperatures really going to warm up. So this could lead to some localized flooding. So that is one of the situations. So you're going to have to make sure that your snow grates are cleared, or the grates are cleared for the snow. Now, as far as the Northern Peninsula is concerned, Friday evening, you're still in the snow, but then as this warm air advances further north, there is a potential for some freezing rain to happen. And just about how much is going to fall is what we need to figure out at this point, but it is looking significant. We could be talking about upwards of 50 millimeters of freezing rain falling, but over a certain period of time. By the time we get into Saturday morning, we're changing over to rain. Temperatures really warming up for essentially the west coast and all the way towards eastern Newfoundland. But again, Northern Peninsula, you're still in that snow, but there's where that freezing rain really sets up on Saturday afternoon, and this is when we will likely see that accumulation. So pay attention to the forecast. Not a bad idea to prepare for this, maybe thinking about the potential for some power outages with this as well, but exactly where that's going to fall and where this is going to happen is what needs to be ironed out. We learned from earlier this week that just even a little change in the forecast can mean the difference between seeing, significant freezing rain or not seeing freezing rain. So definitely something to think about. Now, as far as that snowfall is concerned, now this is just one model. But again, 15, 20 centimeters before that changes over to rain, and some significant snowfall possible for areas in green there. And then here's the freezing rain potential. Again, we're looking at the shift maybe for this, but this takes us through to early next week. And this is just what's here. This could be off the charts. Like I said, could be talking about 50 millimeters of freezing rain. And then as far as that rainfall is concerned along the south coast, this is where the most should fall. But at this point, we could be seeing upwards of 100 millimeters of rain. So definitely not a storm to take lightly. We'll talk a little bit more about it when I come back.
Countries around the world are using trade sanctions to punish Russia for its invasion of Ukraine. But not every country. Take Japan. While countries like the U.S. have a ban on Russian crab, the Japanese seafood market is flooded with it. And that could have a really big effect on the crab industry in this province. This is a big issue for Coast of Bay's Conservative MP Clifford Small, who joins me now. So Japan gets 60% of its crab from Russia. What's your understanding of why it gets so much crab from Russia?
Carolyn, I'm not sure why, but I think that the main reason is because Russia has undercut us in the marketplace in Japan. And as for the sanction aspect from Japan, they've put a 2% tariff on Russian crab, which is basically peanuts. It doesn't affect what's going on there at all. And now I've known about this issue since back in early May, and it was a sensitive time because the Newfoundland crab industry was hoping that Japan would come back to the table, and they were basically on their hands and knees. So I didn't broach the topic back then due to the sensitivity in the fishing industry, and I didn't want to do something that would be detrimental to the dollars that come into our economy from the crab side of the fishing industry. But figures that have been brought forward to me recently by stakeholders show that in October, Japanese purchases of Russian snow crab were up by 400% year over year.
Can you walk us through the market connection here? When Japan is buying this much crab from Russia, how does that affect the market in this province?
Well, traditionally, Japan would purchase 30 to 50% of the crab that was landed in Newfoundland and Labrador. Last year, they basically bought none. Right now, word on the street is that 30% of the snow crab that was landed in Atlantic Canada last year is sitting in inventory. So it's pretty easy math to see that if Japan had purchased its traditional amount of snow crab from us, we wouldn't be looking at snow crab still in the industry, and that would remove a lot of the price pressure that our industry is facing. It looks like we're going to have a strong headwind in the industry this year with a lot of price pressure. So we're encouraging the Prime Minister to talk to the Prime Minister of Japan today to try to advocate for our allies and for our industry.
Yes, and the Japanese Prime Minister is in Ottawa today meeting with Justin Trudeau. So what would you like to see happen? What kind of advocacy would you like to see? What would make things better for the crab industry in this province?
Well, if the Prime Minister would, in fact, advocate for us, and if he's successful with that, that'd be a wonderful thing. Because if we see the kind of prices that we're hearing talk of for next year in the crab industry, it's going to be bad for the economy in general, not just for the fishermen and the processors and plant workers and everyone else, but for the whole economy that depends on spin-offs that come from the fishery. So it's a critical issue, and I hope that something happens, because I brought this to the attention of Minister Murray on October 21st, and she was completely unaware that there was any of this happening. And as well, on December 1st, I met with Japanese officials. So I've brought this behind closed doors. I brought this forward to the people that needed to know it, and it's time now that the public needs to know what's happening.
What should harvesters in the crab industry expect this year if nothing changes?
It's hard to say, but I'm hearing prices of maybe less than $5 being floated, but that's nothing new to anybody in the industry. I'm hearing it from them, actually.
Well, Clifford Small, thank you so much for this.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And as you just heard in that interview, Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida was in Ottawa today holding talks with Justin Trudeau and several cabinet ministers. At the conclusion, Trudeau announced an upcoming trade mission to Japan.
The goals are to expand trade, strengthen our supply chains, and build a sustainable future. These are key elements of Canada's Indo-Pacific strategy.
And that new strategy focuses on closer ties with countries that are not in China's orbit. Energy security and the Ukraine war were also discussed. The visit comes with Japan aiming to reduce its energy dependence on both China and Russia.
Still considering putting your name in?
I'm still considering it. I will say I will make an announcement on Monday on what my future is.
Up next, David Brazel, the interim head of the PCs, talks about his plans for 2023 as part of our look-ahead interviews with the province's political leaders. This week, we're talking to the three political leaders in the province to get their thoughts on the coming year and the future they want for Newfoundland and Labrador. Last night, we heard from Liberal Premier Andrew Furey, and tonight, Here Now's Peter Cowan speaks with David Brazel, the interim leader of the official opposition party, the Progressive Conservatives.
Well, David Brazel, Happy New Year, and thanks for coming in.
Happy New Year to you, and thanks for having me in.
I want to talk about healthcare. It's on a lot of people's minds, but this past year it's also been a very personal issue for you with your own healthcare challenges. Has that changed your perspective, having gone through the healthcare system, dealt with a healthcare emergency, and seen what it's like from the inside?
Very much so. You know, from a couple of perspectives here. One, you know, my new perspective on life when it comes to healthcare is around the fact that when you get in, particularly if you've got a life-threatening ailment, you get quality care in Newfoundland and Labrador. And I don't care who says it, it's the quality care you'd get in any other province or any other jurisdiction around the world here. The issue here becomes, and we've seen it continuously and we're still seeing it, is about getting access to get that first assessment, to determine what kinds of interventions you need, to determine if this is something that's going to become more severe and we need to have immediate interventions. And that's the perspective I got to see. You know, I was fortunate enough, I was in hospital for 8 days, and you know, I was on a ward with a number of other patients, got to talk to their families, I got to talk to nursing students, I got to talk to interns, I got to talk to doctors, dietitians. So I got a real perspective, and they didn't mind opening up once they knew, like, this was going to be, this is fact find, I'm here now, I've gone through it. I want to know exactly, how do we find a way to improve it?
When I talked to the Premier, he listed out a whole long list of, you know, we're recruiting people, we've got bonuses, we're rolling all of this out. What do you think they need to be doing that they're not doing?
Well, all of those are wonderful, and they're all part of a continuum. There's no one quick fix here. The challenge has been, and the criticism, and I don't want to make this about criticizing, the criticism is about being proactive. You know, when I see Tim Houston out of Nova Scotia, and his health department coming here and recruiting students at our medical facilities here in advance before they graduate, when we haven't even talked about it. So the issue is about being proactive, being as proactive at the beginning. I mean, we now can see well in advance what issues we're going to have next year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road. The Health Accord has pretty well outlined that and gave some actual approaches to addressing some of the immediate needs, the interim needs, and some of the long-term needs as part of that. So the issue here is you got to be proactive from day one. I know we're in a crisis now. We've been saying that for 5 years. It's one thing in the House. We've been saying it to prepare not only the people of the province, but more importantly, hoping that government would take a proactive at the beginning so we wouldn't be at the state we are right now.
We've been talking about healthcare jobs. I want to talk about your job. When you took over as interim leader, it's almost 2 years now. Mm-hmm. Did you expect that 2 years later you would still be in that job?
Well, you know, we had no idea, you know, when the party would call for a leadership review. We had no idea when there would be another election. I know, you know, it could be set, you know, the state of the economy, you know, some of the challenges in Newfoundland and Labrador, you know, are there certain things that we need to look at, to set a mandate so that we can set out what would be the direction for the people of Newfoundland and Labrador? No, but I've enjoyed the last 2 years. It's been an eye-opener.
Are you still considering putting your name in?
I'm still considering it. I will say, I will make an announcement on Monday on what my future is. I got a few other things to look at. I've got some doctor's appointment later this week that will have an impact on what I'm doing. You know, I'll discuss again with my closest advisors and my family, but I've been contemplating it.
The federal party got a new leader last year in Pierre Poilievre. He was very successful in Newfoundland and Labrador, got a very high number of votes from folks here. His leadership style is a big change in terms of, you know, going after a more populist vote, going after, you know, and siding with more groups who have grievances against the government, whether it's vaccine mandates, you know, the trucker convoy. Do you think the success he had there can or should be replicated within a leadership contest, or that, you know, that someone with that similar message could or should do well in a run here?
Well, I think they can. The difference here is, and I want to make it perfectly clear, we're progressive conservatives. I'm a progressive conservative, and the Conservative Party we're cousins. And I've said this, you know, publicly before. Right now, we're third cousins, from my perspective, and we're at the point now where it's not the cousin that you invite to the wedding, it's not the cousin that you go out for a drink with when they come in town, but it's the cousin that you have a lot of commonalities, and you'd like to be able to get closer. I'd like to be able to ensure that the Conservative Party federally and the provincial Progressive Conservative Party are first cousins in the next year or so. And that would mean looking at policies that reflect the needs of Newfoundlanders and Labradorians and encourage the communities in Newfoundland and Labrador to benefit from what the federal government are doing. And that policies reflect the thoughts and needs and desires of Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. So, you know, I'm going to be going to Ottawa in the coming weeks, and I'm going to be meeting with the Conservative leader, and I'll have a conversation. We've had 2 private conversations in the past. I've had him in, he met with our caucus, and the initial discussions were in a good place from my perspective and our caucus perspective from progressive conservative needs in Newfoundland and Labrador. I want to make sure that that's going to be his national policy. and that the benefactors of some of the policies nationally will be relevant to Newfoundland and Labrador.
Are you on board with the idea of there's going to be a transition and there needs to be some sort of mechanism, in place in order to help make sure that workers and everyone else are treated fairly in that?
100%, but we're realistic about this. We're not where the NDP says shut down the oil industry and transition to something else. I mean, we've been transitioning from day one since, the last 500 years since people came to Newfoundland and Labrador into other industries. And sometimes industries flourish at this level, sometimes they drop, and you pick up other industries that didn't exist. So you have to have a full-fledged plan here of, what industries are on the downward swing, and how do we still keep them as viable as possible until they're no longer necessary or viable, while we transition to something else, using that skill set, the transition of skills, the retraining, the planning in advance. If you know in 5 or 10 years you're going to need somebody in the IT industry, well, you start training in advance. If it's going to be in aerospace, if it's going to be in hydronet power, start planning that transition process there. But across the board say we're shutting down one industry and we're going to transition to something else that has yet to be developed, that hasn't been bought into, and that we don't have trained skilled workers to be able to make that flourish, is not a good approach here. So I agree, there's a transition into all kinds of other things. We have to be cognizant of the environment. So how do we transition into industries that are going to be environmentally friendly, and that also meet the needs of the skill set that we have in Newfoundland and Labrador? We don't need to be bringing in workers in this province if we know what's coming and we train the skilled workers we already have here to be able to change or divert away or enhance the existing skills they already have.
David Brazel, it's going to be a busy year for you. Thanks for coming in and sharing some of your insights.
Appreciate this.
To work very, very hard. I had to work harder than people who wouldn't have that challenge, that physical challenge. But it was just enjoyable to accomplish.
And what an accomplishment. Up next, I'll speak with a St. John's doctor who's being recognized with one of the country's highest honors. We'll hear about his accomplishments and challenges, but also get ready for a touching love story. Several people from this province were recently appointed to the Order of Canada. Some are well known, like Buddy What's-His Name and the other fellers, and other recipients have made quieter contributions, like Dr. Connor McGuire. You'll often find Dr. McGuire at the Nuclear and Molecular Medicine Department, where he's educating students and improving cancer diagnoses and care through his work in radiology. He's been making his mark in the field for decades, helping introduce PET-CT imaging programs in Alberta and helping to establish the cyclotron and PET-CT imaging center at the hospital in St. John's. But he never thought his contributions would lead to such a high honor.
The first thing I said was, "Pardon me," because I honestly couldn't imagine that I would receive such a huge honor. I was just I was really, really surprised. I guess shocked is another word I could have used, but I was, and I had to take a moment to let it sink in. When I hung up the phone, I got a little emotional because I was extremely honored, but at the same time, I was very, very humbled.
He phoned me and asked if I had seen the email, and I said no. He said, "I've been awarded the Order of Canada," and I just started to cry, which is probably what I'm going to do now. But it was no surprise. It was no surprise to me. I think Connor's worked hard, and whomever he meets can see that.
Well, Connor and Carolyn met in grade 11. They've now been married for 44 years. Their life together and the pivotal events leading up to him receiving this national honor began with both extraordinary devastation and joy. During a summer vacation in Germany, a 21-year-old Connor broke his neck while diving in a river. He was paralyzed. At the same time, he found out he was going to be a dad.
It was initially devastating because one minute you're a big, strong guy, athletic, and the next minute you can't feel anything below your shoulders, and you're paralyzed at a very severe level, and you're in an ICU, and you're not feeling too good about things. Carolyn was my high school sweetheart. And my family, my dad came over right away, and then my mom came over for a while. I had such huge support, but Carolyn in particular was just my rock, and she lifted me up and encouraged me. So, sorry, but she never stopped loving me, and I love her as much to this day. And I'm sorry, it's hard to go right back in that moment in time and not feel strong emotion for the deep love that I received. And Carolyn told me while I was in Germany that she was with child, and I was just overjoyed. We were so fortunate that our families were so loving.
And you find out the man that you are in love with won't walk again, but you're going to have a baby. How do you process that as a young woman?
Well, it was actually Connor's father that set me down, and he said to me, he'd been to Germany and seen Connor, and he knew our relationship and knew I was expecting. And he sat me down, he said, this is a man who now is a quadriplegic. He said, you won't be able to go for those walks in the woods hand in hand. He said he was offering me an out. He said, we love children in this family. And with that kind of support, how could you go wrong?
Carolyn's dad was funny. He said, you're studying to be a doctor, and she's studying to be a nurse. You think you'd have a few clues about birth control. But, it was, to me, a miracle. I had no idea whether I was going to be able to achieve all the milestones that would be required to successfully obtain my medical degree. After that, I have to be honest, once I got into the rehab part of it, I just had the attitude, things can't get any worse, they can only get better. and the only person who can make it better is me. And that's kind of how I approach my life. And I never, after that, I have to be honest, I knew I had a disability. It was obvious. I had to, learn how to push myself around. I was strong in those days, and I could push myself around in a manual chair. And I was able to do far more than I ever thought. And then I looked at, I'm very competitive by nature in sports and anything I did. I was pretty competitive, and not in an aggressive way, but just wanting to achieve my best. And she brought that out of me, but I also just had that natural inclination. So I never approached life as being a disabled person. I never thought about my wheelchair. I would always focus on what I was doing. And so when I was dealing with patients or anybody that I would interact with, I just saw them as a person, and I approached them as a person. And I don't think they saw as much the wheelchair as they saw me. And that's all that really mattered. And I'd rather not have the disability, don't get me wrong. I give anything to go, if I give anything to go back and not that 1 second of stupidity, that led to me breaking my neck. If I could take that back, I'd take it back. You don't, I've always told people that you don't accept a disability, you adjust to it. But I wouldn't trade my life, now that I've lived it, for anything, because it's been a very happy one.
What a story. Well, the date for when Conor Maguire and other recipients will head to Ottawa for the Order of Canada ceremony hasn't been made public yet, but we'll be sure to bring you that story when it happens. At least one person is missing after an explosion at a propane facility 70 kilometers north of Montreal. The fire was not under control as of late this afternoon local time, and officials are concerned about safety and environmental risks. Oil or gas could end up in a nearby river. Police are not able to search the scene until it's declared safe by the dozens of firefighters battling the blaze. Several airlines apologized today for what they've called unacceptable service over the holiday season. Air Canada, Sunwing, and WestJet all testified at an urgent committee called during the parliamentary break.
Indians understand that bad weather may disrupt air travel. However, they expect and deserve to be kept informed about alternative plans and be compensated when their rights are violated. Unfortunately, the circumstances many travelers face this holiday season were completely unacceptable.
Transport Minister Omar Al-Gabra said reforms are being planned to help make passengers deserving refunds get them. Airline executives admitted they should have done better and that communication with customers was lacking. Over the holiday, WestJet canceled 1,600 flights, Sunwing 67.
Well, as I mentioned a little bit earlier tonight, it is going to be a messy weather weekend. Let's just look at what's going to happen as we head into Friday evening and then into Saturday through the afternoon hours. So we're going to see that snow transition through to freezing rain. The freezing rain potential Saturday afternoon could extend from essentially Bonavista North along the TCH all the way through to the West Coast. Anything south of that will fall as rain, so areas essentially from Gander eastward, or east of Gander, I should say, should all fall as rain. Same thing for the south coast as we head through the afternoon on Saturday, and then the northern peninsula, you're looking at snow through the day. There's a better picture of where, anywhere in that pink is where we could see that freezing rain and extended periods of freezing rain at that. Take a look at these temperatures, 7 to 10 or 11 degrees. These will be your morning temperatures. Once we start to get into that risk of freezing rain, temperatures will drop below zero. And then that line of freezing rain will essentially meander as we head even through the day on Sunday and then again on Monday. Just take a look at what the future tracker is showing. So this takes us through to Sunday morning. We're still in that freezing rain potential. Then it shifts a little bit further east. We could be talking about the potential for freezing rain through to Gander, maybe even Clarenville and even further east at this point on Sunday. But again, temperatures well above zero. The Avalon at this point will stay as rain, but the risk of that freezing rain will continue. Of course, up across Labrador, it looks pretty nice. -20 for Lab City with plenty of sunshine. And then just taking a look at the forecast, here we go. As we head into Monday, all of this is going to shift further north. In fact, we could be talking about the potential for some freezing rain as far north as Happy Valley, Goose Bay, and maybe even some rain as this warm up moves further north. Just take a look at the 5-day forecast. There's a whole lot of plus temperatures there and a whole lot of rain in the forecast for St. John's and eastern Newfoundland. As far as central is concerned, pretty much a mix or a mess as we head into Monday, Tuesday, 9 degrees and rain. And then for western Newfoundland, you're looking at that similar forecast. Now you see the temperatures dipping Sunday night, then back up on Monday. That's where we're looking at that risk of some freezing rain. Now, as far as eastern Labrador is concerned, there's that warm up on Tuesday. And then for western Labrador, you're looking at a similar warm up, but it should just be freezing rain potentially on Tuesday. So definitely going to keep an eye on that forecast as well. Here's a nice shot to end tonight. This is a chilly night in Port Saunders. Thank you so much for that shot. Definitely looks chilly. If you have any weather photos, you can send them to any one of those there, especially email nl@photos@cbc.ca.
Well, that is beautiful. And Ashley, you have your work cut up for you over the next few days. What a forecast coming this weekend.
I was trying to get through that, but I think there'll be some more detail tomorrow, but that was a tough one to get through.
Yeah. Stay tuned for more tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. Hope you can come back again tomorrow.
Good night.